Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, June the 6th, 2025. Today, Venus moves into Taurus, and that could well be good news. After all, Venus rules Taurus, and in this video, I want to consider in some detail what it means for Venus to be in Taurus. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, June 6, 2025. So here is the chart for today, as always, set for noon in New York. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And as far as this chart is concerned, the moon is still in Libra. So noon New York time, June the 6th, we've got the moon at around 25 degrees Libra. So moon in Libra it's actually opposition Chiron. That's interesting. I hadn't noticed that before. And it's making a sextile to Mars. So there are things going on there. Now, moon in Libra, in general, the moon is not too badly placed in Libra in some respects, though you could argue that the best place for the moon, or rather the best part of Libra for the moon to be in, is the first 10 degrees, because the moon is, I think, in its face. That's a minor dignity, minor essential dignity. So last third of Libra, the last sort of decanate, well, the moon is quite close to Spica, which is a sort of a fixed star, which tends to be quite fortunate, though it doesn't stay long making that conjunction to Spica. And it's in the Via Combusta for sure. So, wherever you are now, the moon is in that last half of Libra. Remember, Via Combusta, last half of Libra, first half of Scorpio. And so, when the moon moves into Libra, moves into the Via Combusta, things can happen, as I said yesterday, and we shouldn't expect everything to entirely work to plan. Now, moon does make quite a few aspects. It makes a sextile to Mars, and it makes a trine to Mercury. So yesterday I talked about the fact that there was a sextile between Mercury and Mars. There is still a sextile between Mercury and Mars. That aspect is still, very active. Mercury is at 25 Gemini, Mars is at 24 Leo, so only 1 degree out. So, a lot of the things I said yesterday about Mercury sextile Mars still apply. It's an aspect that is, dynamic. It's can be quite verbal. It's a good time to be expressing our ideas. And in fact, you could argue that today the Mercury sextile Mars could be even stronger because it's being picked up by the moon. Moon making sextile to Mars, moon trine Mercury. So I think for many of us, we really are going to be able to express ourselves and have an impact. And, moon trine Mercury, the two communication planets. Moon, we communicate with our heart. Mercury, we communicate with our mind. And so they're coming together in a trine. So, this is a great time to be saying or articulating whatever might be on our mind. And then the moon does make an opposition to Chiron. And, I think that Chiron opposition, it does happen, every month the moon makes an opposition to Chiron. So in itself, that aspect is not exactly spectacular. But it is taking it at the same time as Mars is moving to a trine of Chiron. And also Mercury is moving to a sextile of Chiron. So it really comes together. And, moon opposition Chiron might actually be quite disruptive. There's moon in Libra. We want it to be balanced. We don't want to upset the apple cart. But Chiron is an individualist, can be a militant individualist, wants to be different if you take the maverick perspective on Chiron. So there might be some tension there. We might feel we have to do something. We have to say something. And, that is also reflected in the fact that, Mercury is sextile Chiron, and Mars is trine Chiron. And at the same time as all of this, Venus is moving into Taurus, and I make it that Venus moves into Taurus at 5:43 in the morning today, London time. So actually that means that in California, if you're in California or Alaska or Hawaii, then actually Venus would have moved into Taurus last night. And, Venus moving into Taurus, that's the first time that we can really unambiguously say that, Venus is really quite sort of well placed. We've just had Venus in Aries. It seems to have been on, Venus has been on and off in Aries, it seems to be for ages. And Venus is, of course, in its detriment in Aries. And then, we did have Venus in Pisces relatively recently, but then, end of Pisces, Venus was, making conjunctions to Saturn and Neptune, a few months ago. And, that was a bit complicated. But now Venus is in Taurus. Venus is in its own sign. And you could say that Venus has arrived. And so, in a general sense, Venus in Taurus, has got to be good news, hasn't it? And, you can say all the usual stuff about Venus in Taurus. It's very sensual. It's has a natural feel for, what is beautiful, what is attractive. It's a feminine planet in a feminine sign. And, it can be indulgent. No doubt about that. And can enjoy the good things in life. And, if you've got Venus in Taurus and you don't enjoy the good things in life, well, then that could be troublesome. Hitler had Venus in Taurus. And Hitler, in his own way, was quite austere. I mean, he was sort of a non-smoking, non-drinking vegetarian. I mean, I'm a vegetarian. Or I don't smoke and I don't drink, so at least I've got something in common. Well, I've got something in common with him. But, a Taurus, but then I'm not a Taurus. I don't have my sun in Taurus. But, Venus in Taurus without vices, that might actually be cause for worry. Overall, Venus in Taurus, does look good. Venus in Taurus, it does have a dark side. And I think that when I look at some people who have got Venus in Taurus, I think that dark side will be demonstrating. As I said, Hitler had Venus in Taurus, and Venus in Taurus, in its own way, can be quite stubborn. And if you take the view that Venus is a planet of war, via, for example, victory and the Greek goddess Nike. If you take that view, of course, the Roman equivalent of Nike is Victoria, and so that would be Venus. Venus moving into Taurus, enjoying being successful and perhaps being successful at someone else's expense. But I'll be looking in more detail at that. Just at the end of the video. So that is the picture in the Americas. If you set the chart for Washington, D.C., if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, it's not so different. I mean, the moon is still in sort of the moon is in mid to late Libra. Moon is trine Sun, and you don't get necessarily the trine to Mercury. That's perhaps later in the day, but I think I think it's not a big difference there between Australia and the Americas in terms of how you experience today. And then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And Mercury heliocentrically is at 25 Cancer, so Mercury is making a trine to Saturn, and is actually making a trine to Saturn. It's making a square to Chiron. It's sort of making a sextile to Uranus. So Mercury is picking things up there. Remember, Mercury in a heliocentric chart is very much the connecting planet. It's the process within the chart. In a geocentric chart, that role is filled by the moon. But Mercury, Mercury trine Saturn might allow us to get things together. Might allow us also to be very clear in terms of what we say. But Mercury is also square Chiron. So Mercury square Chiron wants to be different, wants to say something that causes a stir. So Mercury square Chiron, so you say something and you're not quite sure how people are going to respond. And then straight away Mercury then makes a trine to Saturn. Then you have to perhaps sort out the mess or sort out some of the chaos you've created. So that might be a way in which those aspects change from one thing to another. Then finally Mercury makes a sextile to Uranus, and I think that's fairly self-explanatory. It's being able to be different in terms of what we say and perhaps even what we think. But overall, I don't think that the heliocentric picture is especially dramatic. It's still got that Venus conjunct Pluto, which I've been talking about for the last couple of days. That's still operational, and that might represent a bit of jealousy and possessiveness, especially as Venus is moving into Taurus. And you could argue that there is something a bit possessive about Venus in Taurus in terms of relationships. Taurus doesn't like to let things go. It's a fixed sign. So now let me look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, June the 6th, 2025. Aries, it does feel that things are happening, and there's probably no excuse to be bored. You can enjoy other people's company, and it's a good idea to find out what other people are up to, because they're capable of doing many different things, and through other people's help you can actually be extra powerful. So you don't actually have to do everything on your own. You maybe don't even have to initiate things, because sometimes other people all by themselves can make things happen, and they can take the initiative. And that's something that Aries can often appreciate. If you're an Aries, it can be tiresome having to constantly take the initiative, having to always be the one to start something, and it just gets exhausting. And so you might be pleasantly surprised by the fact that other people are ready to show their hand, are ready to make suggestions, and so that is certainly a good thing about today. And in terms of what's going on, astrologically, Moon is sextile Mars, Moon in Libra, sextile Mars in Leo. That really does mean that things are moving. You can motivate other people, and maybe they can motivate you as well. And at the same time, Moon is making a trine to Mercury. So whatever you've got to say, Aries, now's the time to say it. The words will flow freely, and you'll be pretty fluent, I think. And at the same time, there will be a lot of mutual understanding. You will be able to make your position clear in the same way that I think in many cases other people will be able to make their position clear. And you might actually find that some people are quite definite in their views, and that is because Venus is moving into Taurus. So Venus is representative of another person, and could be someone who is important in your life, someone who you might have a relationship with, or someone whose decisions impact you, maybe a close friend. But Venus moving into Taurus it's a change. Venus in Aries was in its detriment. Venus in Taurus was in its own sign, and Taurus is a fixed sign. So it might be someone who is definite and who is able to make their position clear. And Venus is moving out of Aries. So Venus moving out of Aries, Venus in Aries, it was your sign, and it might be that you feel that someone is stepping out of your shadow. You have a powerful personality, at least you can have a powerful personality. And so with Venus in Taurus, look at people's behavior. And so if you have had a powerful influence on another person, or you have felt that someone was clinging to you in a way, then with Venus moving into Taurus, there might be a change. And you could say, oh well, that's not a nice change because you like to have the power, but it's also good that another person is able to be assertive and is able to make it clear who they are and what they want. And I should say, by the way, with Venus moving into Taurus, it's moving through Taurus, for the next few weeks, and with that movement, you might have a better appreciation of money. I mean, I don't know what's been going on with you and money. Sorry, I should actually tell you when Venus leaves Taurus. I should have checked that. So Venus leaves Taurus. I'm sorry for being so badly prepared. Venus leaves Taurus in July. I think it looks like about around the 5th of July, around Independence Day, just after Independence Day. Venus leaves the sign. So between now and Independence Day, if you're in America, or just over the next month, then Aries, you might have a chance to really get things together in a financial sense. You've had ideas, you've thought about possibilities about what you could do, and now there's a financial side that you need to address. And Venus in Taurus may give you the ability to actually start to really think about it and make some useful changes. So, overall, Aries, it does look as if things are happening, things are moving, and I think other people need to be observed and watched because they are on better form, and I think that that's good for everyone. Taurus, Venus is moving into your sign, and that has absolutely got to be good news. I mean, Venus is your ruler, and for a long time Venus has been in a somewhat indifferent state. Sort of earlier in the year we had Venus conjunct Saturn and Neptune and the North Node, and there was always this question about whether or not Venus was in a good position when it was in Pisces. It might have been in the sign of its exaltation, but it was conjunct Saturn, and that might have been a problem. Then Venus moved into Aries, and of course Venus is in its detriment in Aries, and you weren't quite sure how to handle things. You weren't quite sure, whether you were in the right place, and you were perhaps holding back and not being happy holding back. And now that Venus is moving into Taurus, it's a big and favourable change. And for the next month, between now and around July the 5th, Venus is moving through this sign. So you've got a whole month. Venus, your ruler, being in its own sign, and in a general way, that is, that's great news. And it allows you to, make the most of everything and to enjoy yourself, yes, but also to be very definite about, who you are. And you might also be thinking about, what you look like. Venus is a planet of beauty. It's a planet of attractiveness. It's moving into your sign, so you might be wanting to think about how you're presenting yourself over the next month, and that could require some preparation. And today Venus in moving into Taurus, well, it's only just starting, and you may not be fully on board with the fact that Venus is in Taurus. You still may feel, some lingering pressure or some tension that, you're not being taken seriously enough. That's a lingering feeling from Venus moving into Aries. And, when it really clicks that Venus has actually moved into Taurus, you're going to feel, a whole lot better. Maybe it won't click today. Maybe it won't click until tomorrow. Maybe you have to wait for the moon to move into Scorpio, because the moon is in Libra today, and with the moon in Libra, you may feel still a bit uncertain. You may feel there are things you need to get right, and you're not ready. But things are definitely moving now. It is important today, Taurus, that you are very aware, that you're very conscious, that you watch what is going on, because the details do matter, and you can't gloss over things. And what you don't want to happen is for you to sort of flip into a different space, and almost like in a swoon. It could happen. I'm not saying it will happen, but your own awareness and consciousness really do matter. And so that does mean that you should avoid doing anything which blunts your consciousness. So I would have said that today, for example, is a bad day for drinking alcohol. And you might be inclined to, Venus is in Taurus, why not start enjoying yourself? But the full impact of Venus in Taurus hasn't really started. So, alcohol, non-prescription drugs and medication, these kind of things should be avoided. Anything that changes your consciousness, and it's not just about drugs and alcohol, it could be just too much fantasizing, just moments where you're just not all there. And so monitor yourself, all the time, and make sure you have this focus. Now, I don't want to make you concerned, and we can see what I've just been saying in a negative light in a more positive light, and that would be in a purely spiritual sense. So if you engage in something today that has a spiritual dimension, then I think actually it can actually work very well. So if you're in a safe place, and you're meditating, or you're involved in some spiritual practice, and you flip into a different dimension, well, I suppose that's fine, isn't it? On the other hand, if you're driving, you don't want to flip into it, or playing with a chainsaw, you don't want to flip into a different dimension. That's not really what you want to do. So from a spiritual perspective, things could work out, and you could enjoy shifting your consciousness, but you don't want to mix things up. You don't want to mix the material and the spiritual. But I really don't want to be negative in my reading for today. The main thing is that Venus is moving into Taurus, and that really should work in your favor. Gemini, the moon is trine Mercury, and that aspect should work very well for you. As I said at the beginning of this video, the moon and Mercury are the communication planets, and all things being equal, Gemini is a very communicative planet. Gemini is a very communicative sign, and ruled by Mercury, and that's a communicative planet. And the question is, how do you communicate? Sometimes you communicate very well, and you're absolutely correct. But just because you're right, and just because you're being honest, doesn't always mean that it works. Gemini can, in its own way, be blunt if there is a particular fact. I think every Gemini can think of examples where they told someone the truth and they get a completely negative reaction. And when you get that negative reaction, the reason is very often insensitivity. And every Gemini has an insensitive streak. I was looking at the comments over the day, and someone commented. Sorry, I can't remember, their name doesn't come to mind, but they were sort of mentioning how Virgos and Scorpios get a really bad rap, and that they're sort of seen as being particularly difficult signs. Now, I'm not saying that's true, by the way, and I do think there is a cycle of, what is the worst sign, and sometimes that sign has been Gemini. When I first started studying astrology in the 1980s, many people thought that Geminis were the worst sign in the zodiac. I came across that quite a lot, and so why would people say that? Yeah, just remember, I'm a Gemini. I'm talking about myself here, not at least my sun is in Gemini, and the reason might be because Geminis seem callous, seem a bit disinterested and selfish and insensitive. But today Moon is trine Mercury, and that Moon trine Mercury does give you sensitivity. It allows you perhaps to say the obvious, but in such a way that you don't cause too much upset, because the mind and the heart are working together, and they can get over the message, in such a way that means that the messenger doesn't get shot. And additionally, though, so we need to contrast that with the fact that, Mercury is making a sextile to Chiron, and that Mercury sextile Chiron, it's exact today, tomorrow, probably it was exact yesterday, but that sextile is pretty close. And that also says something about the way you communicate, and you want to say something that is different, and through your words you want to move things along, and perhaps you feel that things need to be pointed out that people are not aware of or don't want to be aware of, and that might be your responsibility. But again, yes, it's true that Chiron can be the maverick. Chiron wants to be independent. Chiron wants to demonstrate that it's thinking out of the box. And you can do all that, but you can do it in such a way that doesn't cause too much upset, that doesn't mean that the messenger gets shot. And so use that Mercury sextile Chiron. Mercury sextile Chiron can also be about pointing out suffering. Some people are oblivious to suffering. Wherever you think that suffering is taking place. There are global examples. Whatever you think, there's suffering in many parts of the world. I was looking at the statistics on Sudan, by the way. People have gone on and on about Gaza, and then I was looking at what was going on in Sudan. We haven't got much news about Sudan. I mean, you sometimes read the news stories about Sudan, and the amount of children who had been killed in Sudan. I think it was. I looked. It was something like over 500,000, and something like 8 million people were displaced, and I was quite shocked by that. I kind of knew, but I didn't actually look at the numbers, and the numbers are really horrific from Sudan. And people just focus on just one thing; they just want to look at Gaza or something else. But there is actually, believe it or not, a much bigger tragedy is unfolding in Sudan. I'm not discounting what's going on in Gaza. I'm just pointing out that we need to look at what else is going on. And so Gemini, you might see something that other people don't. Say, hold on, I'm just doing what this is a kind of bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I know, but that would be Mercury that would be an example of Mercury sextile Chiron in action. So, for example, by me saying you should focus, suggesting, I'm just perhaps being a maverick here, and of course Chiron is a maverick, that I don't want to sing my own praises too much. I'm not really a maverick, but by saying something which is off script, which is not what people want to hear, then you can attract negative attention. You can get unsubscribed, for example. So if you've got a YouTube channel and Mercury is sextile Chiron, you might be tempted to say something you shouldn't. But then Moon is trine Chiron and Moon is trine Mercury, so that should give one some sensitivity. Sorry, I'm being a bit meta there, this meta forecast. So I'm sorry about that, and I'm kind of somewhat distracted there. And so, I do think that things really are moving, and I think from a mental perspective, your mind could potentially be going all over the place, and I mean that in quite a fortunate way. So that's a reason to think that today could be interesting, and you can be sensitive if you want to be, but I also see the capacity for complete insensitivity as well, if you really want to be a maverick. And on a different note, don't forget, Mercury is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. Now, that conjunction of Jupiter is not exact yet, but over the next few days, Mercury and Jupiter getting closer and closer. They make a conjunction, I believe, in the last degree of Gemini. And, when you see Mercury conjunct Jupiter, less than 4 degrees, around 4 degrees apart. Now it's closing to exactitude over the next few days and over the weekend and perhaps into early next week. And so Mercury conjunct Jupiter does allow you to really express yourself. It actually makes you very fortunate because Mercury is moving to a conjunction of Jupiter. And also it could be very good for relationships. So certain relationships, Gemini, have the capacity to really work for you with this Mercury making a conjunction to Jupiter, and you may actually have an opportunity over the next few days to make a connection with someone who you have maybe in the past you found it difficult, but now you're seeing the opportunity. So if there's someone you want to get in touch with, you want to you want to get involved with for whatever reason, then Gemini, now might be your chance. Don't miss the moment, because very soon Mercury and Jupiter will be out of Gemini and they will be in Cancer. Cancer, we have the Moon moving through a Libra all day long. Okay, if you are in California, then, or in fact, if you're in the Americas in general, then this evening the moon will actually be moving into Scorpio, and Moon is your ruler, so the Moon moving into Scorpio might suggest that in the Americas this evening you might experience a change. I don't think that will be a problematic change. I think if you're a Cancer, Moon in Scorpio is absolutely fine. For other signs can have problems with Moon in Scorpio, but I think for you, the Moon and Scorpio energy is something you're absolutely familiar with. If you're not in the Americas, then tomorrow the Moon will move into Scorpio, and that's something I'll be talking about when I do my horoscope for the weekend. But I think that overall we can regard the Moon as being in Libra, and as I've already said or suggested, with the Moon in Libra, you might feel that you just want to stay put. You're happy where you are, and you could. That is certainly an option, but there are opportunities. The Moon is it's conjunct Spica. It's quite close to Spica. Spica is a fixed star that tends to be regarded as being fortunate, so that's good for you. And additionally, the Moon is making a sextile to Mars, and it's making a trine to Mercury. So this means that you really do know how to look after yourself and how to safeguard your own interests, and you can actually be very dynamic in your own way. Now, you may not feel like being dynamic, but you can be, and the things you say can be quite powerful, and your sensitivity will be on absolutely amazing form, and you can pick things up out of nowhere. You will just understand that moon trine Mercury. And that moon trine Mercury may actually have a telepathic quality. And, it helps, but it's in air signs. Now, you might say, well, that's not good. It's an air sign. It doesn't have the sensitivity of a water sign. So, what is the connection between air signs and psychic ability? Well, water signs on their own in a pure form can just be awash with everything and just can't really get to the point. But air signs is about creating a situation where the facts start to emerge, and air signs allow for some factual precision. So moon trine Mercury could be about just picking things up and being able to understand them and being able to verbalize them to yourself. You don't necessarily have to verbalize them to anyone else. And additionally, the moon is starting to make a trine to Jupiter. That's just a straight fortunate aspect. Now, that moon trine Jupiter is going to be exact, I think, so late in the day if you're very late in your day if you're in the Americas. Won't actually be exact until sometime probably early tomorrow, or maybe even later tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But still, it is applying to that moon, to Jupiter. So overall, the position of the moon is looking good, and I think that's going to allow you to have a good day, and a day that you can, in most cases, enjoy on your terms. Though I should say that the moon is making an opposition to Chiron, and moon in Libra, Chiron in Aries. Now, normally that wouldn't necessarily be particularly important because it happens so regularly. But this time round, we have got Chiron at 25 Aries. The moon will be at 25 Aries. Mercury is at 25 Aries. Mars is at 24 Aries. So Chiron is quite a prominent influence at the moment, and Chiron could be about pressure upon you to do something different, and not just different, but you might feel that you have to take a small risk. And when I say risk, I'm probably talking about a risk that might seem reputational, or could be about embarrassing yourself. You do something that no one's expecting, and you do it in a relatively public way. And many Cancerians might feel they just don't want to do it, that they're not up to it. They just don't want to take the risk. It's Friday, it's the end of a week. Why make things complicated? But if you see the opportunity and if you feel it's the right thing to do, it might really be the right thing to do, because it's not just the fact that moon is opposition Chiron. It gets help from Mercury. So moon trines Mercury and makes an opposition to Chiron. So and moon is also sextile Mars. So there could be a moment of dynamism for you, Cancer, where you do something, you're not sure if it's wise, you might worry about attracting criticism, but it might be the right thing to do. And from an ethical perspective, it might be the right thing to do. I'm not telling you should do it, but if you see that challenge, be aware of that challenge and, think about it, go through it, and, try to make the right decision. Leo, you have a lot to say for yourself. There's a lot you want to communicate, and I think today, Leo, you're actually able to communicate in a fairly powerful way. I think people are going to really, listen to you. They will take on board what you say and what you suggest. So, don't underestimate yourself. And this may be the moment where you have to, where you have to communicate something, because, in your own way, you're attractive and you're charismatic, and people will stop and listen. And so Leo, do consider all of that, and consider what you have to offer, and how people might respond to you, because I think they really might respond to you in quite a powerful way, because at the moment you are a powerful person, and you're a powerful person for a number of reasons. Certainly in terms of what you say, you come over as being very, very convincing. And so you could say, Leo, well, don't be shy. If you've got something that's on your mind, then speak freely, and people will respond. And I think in most cases they'll respond in a very sort of positive way. And additionally, Venus is moving into Taurus. Now, Venus moving into Taurus could actually be quite important for you, because Venus is moving into an angular sign from a Leo perspective. Leo is a fixed sign. Taurus is a fixed sign. Leo is at the top of the chart. It's often connected with ambition and what you're trying to push forward with. And so over the next month, then you have a chance to make real progress at work. If you're working in your career, in your business, you can make progress there. Even if you're not working, you can make progress with your ambitions. And additionally, with Venus in Taurus, you're looking good. You can look good. Venus is a planet of beauty. Venus moving into this position, I regard it as the looking in the mirror aspect, looking at yourself in the mirror. I'm not I don't want to advocate vanity. You don't want to be like Snow White's mother-in-law, but still, is that mother-in-law? Is that the right word? No, it's not the right word, is it? Snow White's, stepmother. That's the phrase, isn't it? Snow White's stepmother. Yeah, you don't want to be like Snow White's stepmother. But still, the way you look is important, and you may regard it as being important. And it's not just vanity. I mean, there could be an element of vanity there, but it might be of more concern than usual. I mean, I'm just saying this because that is one way of looking at Venus moving into Taurus. But in general, Venus is it's in its own sign in Taurus. So you have the capacity to look good, and you also have the capacity to be successful, and you have the ability to project yourself, in a really very powerful way over the next month. So over the next month, I don't know what your plans are over the next month. But hopefully you'll be in a position where you can do something useful, where you can take advantage of what other opportunities, take advantage of whatever opportunities come your way. So overall, Leo, things are looking good, and also today Moon is sextile Mars. Mars is still in Leo. Actually, Mars is not going to be in Leo forever. It's now well into the last decade of the sign, but with Mars in Leo, Moon sextile Mars in Leo, then you can speak with with Moon sextile Mars in Leo, you can speak with power, and it's not just that. You've got Mercury sextile Mars like we had yesterday, so you're able to really, really project yourself in a way that is unmissable. So I actually think, Leo, it can be a day that is full of opportunities, but you've really got to make the most of it. It's not a day for just shrinking into the shadows. Now that would not be a good idea. Virgo, at the moment, you are feeling a few changes going on, and I think that most of these changes are pretty good. I mean, we've got Venus moving into Taurus, And I've been talking a lot about Venus in moving into Taurus. I regard Venus moving into Taurus as being a good thing. Venus is Venus is in its own sign, and so when Venus in its own sign, and it's in Taurus, and Taurus is an Earth sign, and you Virgo are an Earth sign. So what would that mean? I think that Venus has a trine relationship to your sign. So Venus moving into Taurus, I think in a general sense, should certainly help relationships. Relationships should be running in a way that is fairly smooth. Things just move from one thing to another in a very natural way. And so take advantage of social and interpersonal opportunities there. And Venus in Taurus can also be about your comfort, what looks comfortable to you. And that's generally what Venus is about. And you might be becoming more adventurous with Venus moving into Taurus. Even though Venus is in a fixed sign, you might be just attracted to things which could be otherworldly, they could be exotic, they could even be esoteric if you're interested in spirituality and magic and the occult, that kind of thing. There might be an attraction there, and so that's one side of what's happening today. But there is a material side. It's not all sort of pie in the sky spirituality. I think the moon is in Libra, and because the moon is in Libra, making the financial aspect of things can't be entirely ignored, or rather shouldn't be entirely ignored, because the moon is making a trine to Mercury. Mercury is your ruler, and so with moon trine Mercury, this might be an opportunity to really sort something out financially. It's a Friday, end of a working week, and so what's left to do? Don't slack off, and there may be opportunities to make some extra money, put yourself in a position where in future you might get a pay rise, or it could be about you seeing how money is working, and because you see how money is working, you can make a suggestion, and perhaps other people can benefit from your advice, because you'll have a good feeling for money today, and you have an opportunity to actually communicate what you think about money. And I think in most cases you will come over as really being very, very convincing, or at least you can start to be convincing. I think you absolutely know what's right at the moment. Absolutely know what's right when it comes to money and material stuff. But it's possible people don't entirely listen to you as much as they should be. You may feel that you're getting not all of the respect you deserve, and you shouldn't worry about it. You shouldn't worry about it at all. Maybe it is because it's Friday. You've got something to say, and you're quite serious about it, but people are half listening to you, and it just may be that it's work in progress, that you have to sort of wait out the weekend, and then on Monday, just before Jupiter leaves Gemini and moves into Cancer on Monday, you may need to repeat what you say today. And when you repeat what you say today, I think you will get your message across. So it might be a feeling that you can get half your message across. People kind of understand it, but they don't fully understand the implications of what you're saying. But you keep trying, and in the end, it does make sense. Now, in terms of relationships, Mercury is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter, and that conjunction with Jupiter takes place in the last degree of Gemini. I think that conjunction with Jupiter is is at the beginning of next week, but it's getting close. And so with relationships, with contacts, with other people, this is a time to get close to people who could help you. They could matter. They could matter to you. So, don't miss the opportunity. If there's someone you want to get closer to, or there's someone you want to attract their attention, you're trying to attract their attention, then you really do try. Do give it your best shot with Mercury conjunct Jupiter. Because it's this conjunction is potentially quite fleeting. Once Mercury and Jupiter move into Cancer, things will change. You can still you'll still be able to benefit from Mercury and Jupiter in Cancer, but don't miss the opportunity. And I'm not making any guarantees, by the way, and it may be a situation where you have to put in the work. If you look at Mercury and Jupiter, if you regard Jupiter as being another person, Jupiter is a slower planet. Mercury moves faster than Jupiter. So what that might mean is that Mercury has to do all the work. So if you're trying to get in touch with someone, don't assume that they're going to make any moves, that they're going to help you. You are the one that has to do the moving to Jupiter. So that may tell you something about how you should manage relationships. And I must emphasize, I'm not just talking about anything sort of romantic. It could be you need to get in touch with someone for some material reason. It could be that there's a potential, at work or some contact that could help you professionally. Just someone who helps you in your ambitions, whatever those ambitions might be. But you might have to make the move, you might have to make the phone call, you might have to take the initiative, and that might not be something you entirely want to do, but it might be advisable to to see what you can do, and just don't wait for things to happen. Libra, Venus is moving into Taurus, and Venus moving into Taurus is interesting, and it's good in one sense that Venus is moving into Taurus, because Venus is, of course, your ruler, and so when Venus is in Taurus, it's good for you because Venus is in its own sign, and so in terms of your general health and well-being, then that's great. But then on the other hand, Venus is in Taurus. Taurus and Libra are two signs that are both ruled by Venus, but they're very different signs. And so making the switch from that Venus in Aries energy that we've had for so long, and now we've got, you move into Venus in Taurus, it may be a bit of a problem, changing gears. Venus in Taurus, it's a serious placement, especially if you're a Libran. And Librans, sometimes they do like to have a light touch. They don't want to take things too seriously. They don't always want to get too deeply into things. And with Venus moving into Taurus, don't forget, Venus, when it moves into Taurus, it does actually start making a square to Pluto. And so over the next month, while it's true that you can benefit from Venus in Taurus, I think it's going to make you lucky. It's going to allow things to work in your favor, but you've got to adopt the right approach. You've got to take things seriously. It's not a time to be trivial, and you've got to make the effort to look under the surface. Again, sometimes Librans just don't want to look under the surface, but if you are prepared to look under the surface, you can find all sorts of things, and you can really benefit from them. But again, you need to be methodical, and you need to be serious. And it might be the case that things that are difficult for other people are actually quite easy for you once you give it a go. And that might mean getting your hands dirty, getting involved in things that you kind of feel that you don't really want to get involved with. But that might be how Venus in Taurus works for you. So for sure, Venus in Taurus is good news, but it has to be handled in the right way. If you take things lightly, then things don't really amount to much, do they? And as far as the specifics of today are concerned, Moon is still in Libra. Moon is making favorable aspects to Mercury and Mars, and that means that today you're going to be very alive, and you're going to be ready to participate, even though Venus is moving into Taurus. Venus, your first reaction to Venus in Taurus might be to sort of withdraw. This is all a bit heavy, but I don't think you're necessarily going to feel Venus in Taurus like today, absolutely on the dot. 5:43 a.m. London time, Venus moves into Taurus, everything changes. I don't think it's quite like that, especially while the moon is in Libra. With the moon in Libra, you're to a great extent going to be your usual self, and with the moon making a trine to Mercury, your ability to talk is going to be good, and with moon sextile Mars, you're going to be able to communicate with great power, and that moon sextile Mars could actually be quite good for relationships. It's a good time to be introducing yourself to other people, getting to know people better, being able to talk about many different things, and being able to create the right setting for future gains, and then those gains might be in terms of relationships. So as you can see, there are things are changing today, and I do think that Venus moving into Taurus is important, but again, you may not feel its full impact immediately. And one other thing, do stay focused. Don't get distracted. There's some danger that you might be sort of thinking about something that is irrelevant, extraneous, and you're distracted and you're not focusing on what you should be focusing on, and as a result you might make a mistake. And that's especially important if you're doing anything that is safety critical. And so do stay focused, unless you're in a place where you don't have to be focused, where things aren't safety critical. If you're in your own space where nothing can go wrong, then sure, you can have all kinds of thoughts and distractions. You might even be able to benefit from thoughts and distractions, some random thoughts, distractions, changes of consciousness. When I say changes of consciousness, I don't mean alcohol and drug induced changes of consciousness. I'm talking about the change of consciousness that comes with for example, meditation, or just allowing your mind to wander. In fact, as I was saying to Taurus, today is actually a really not a good day for alcohol and non-prescription medications. Absolutely not. They should be avoided, because you want to be able to focus. Scorpio, the moon is in late Libra, and it's getting ready to move into your sign. In fact, if you're in the Americas, then this evening the moon will move into Scorpio. I'm not sure about Brazil. Maybe in Brazil it won't be. It'll be until after midnight. But I think for pretty much everywhere in the Americas, the moon will move into Scorpio late this evening, will move into your sign late this evening. So it could be the case, Scorpio, that if you're an American Scorpio and you're involved in late night activities, late evening activities, you might experience a sudden change. And it could be a change for the better. But I think that for most of us, I'm not a Scorpio. I would not presume to be a Scorpio. But for most Scorpios, the moon is going to be in Libra for most of the day, or in most cases all of the day. And so, with the moon in Libra, you might feel that you're just waiting for something, and there are things that you don't feel you want to do, you don't feel that you're ready for. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you should do nothing. The moon is making a sextile to Mars, and that moon sextile Mars could be of great benefit. It allows you to do things which work in your favor, which allow you to pursue your own ambitions, but which at the same time don't draw any attention to you. So it's actually, a great day for, working behind the scenes. People aren't aware of your impact. They don't know what you're doing, but actually you're very busy, and so in a way, it can be a day of great freedom. You can do what you like, you can manipulate what you like, and your actions, they won't get any attention. Of course, they won't get any praise, I don't think, but that's good. And so we do perhaps get the feeling that Scorpio is setting something up. And so do think about that. And it's not just about career or material ambition. It may be just something you feel that you have to prepare in your own way, and you don't want to be disturbed. In fact, it is best if you're not disturbed, because when you're not being disturbed, you have maximum power. Now, arguably, the main thing going on today is Venus moving into Taurus, and that is a big event. And Venus is moving into your opposite sign, and Venus is ruler of Taurus, your opposite sign, and that may say something about relationships, and it may say something about the people you have to deal with. So Venus moving from Aries to Taurus may indicate that some people are becoming stronger and more definite. In the past, they hadn't been ready to make commitments. It may have been unclear, what they wanted, what they were trying to do. But now there is clarity, and so if someone has been weak in the past, or perhaps indecisive in the past, that person might be important to you. It could be a partner, it could be someone you share your life with. It could be, it needn't be. It could be someone else of significance. You might have just been starting to reach some conclusions about them, but with Venus moving into Taurus, things can change, and someone who seemed unclear is now becoming much more clear. And Venus in Taurus can be very stubborn, and you might find that someone is surprisingly stubborn. You think it might be easy to persuade them to do something, but actually, now that Venus is in Taurus, they're prepared to hold their ground. So, Scorpio, it's very important that you don't underestimate people. Then with Venus moving into Taurus, and Venus stays in Taurus for a month, I think until around sort of July the 5th. So over the next month, other people must not be underestimated, and consider their strengths, and consider how you may be able to benefit from another person's strength. So that's certainly a way to look at it. Venus in Taurus, by the way, could represent a new person arriving on the scene, someone who you may not be immediately aware of. So if you're looking for a new relationship, new contacts, you're feeling alone, someone new might be appearing, and to begin with you might not notice them. It's almost at a sort of unconscious level. You see them just in the corner of your eye, but you're not really aware of them. But so that is a possibility with Venus moving from Aries to Taurus. Sagittarius, Mercury is getting really close to Jupiter now, really close. And I've already talked about this, but I think that this conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter in Gemini, which is your opposite sign, is something that you need to really take on board over the weekend in particular, as they get really close, and then they make the conjunction, last degree of Gemini, then both of them move into Cancer. And this conjunction probably is about other people, and it's about getting closer to other people. And that's a very simple way of looking at it. And it could be that someone, for one reason or another, really wants your attention. They might even want your friendship or your companionship, or they just want something from you, whatever it might be. And so do look at other people's behavior and how they are responding to you. It does seem that you have something to offer. Now, this may be a situation that you don't want to have anything to do with, but you should at the very least be aware of it. And also with Mercury making a conjunction to Jupiter, Mercury could colour Jupiter to an extent. And, Mercury is a planet of communication, and so with Mercury moving to a conjunction of Jupiter, you may have quite a lot to say for yourself. And today we've got the Moon making a sextile to Mars, making a sextile to Mercury, and tomorrow, maybe even late today, if you're in the Americas, the Moon makes a trine to Jupiter. So things are moving, and I think things are actually moving in a social sense and in an interpersonal sense. That there are a lot of people around you, and I think that you can benefit from their company. And this is what Jupiter in Gemini is all about. Jupiter in Gemini, your opposite sign, it's about other people, and Jupiter's not going to be in Gemini for much longer. Jupiter is now at 2916 Gemini. It's really about to move into Cancer. So do take advantage of this opportunity. It does matter, and if you leave it until next week, Jupiter will move into Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer is going to bring other opportunities. Jupiter is your ruler. Jupiter moving into Cancer, Cancer is a sign of Jupiter's exaltation. So you will benefit from Jupiter moving into Cancer. Don't worry about that. But it would be a shame if you didn't finish things off over the next few days. And there are people I do think you can get closer to if you really try. And at the same time, Sagittarius, I think that you are in a fairly strong position. If you want something to happen, Sagittarius, you really can make it happen. People are going to pay attention to you. And so, if you can be bothered to assert yourself, you won't be disappointed by the results. People will realize that you are there, that you need to be taken seriously. And, through your own efforts, you can create, some kind of transformation. And so if you don't like the way things are, you don't have to put up with them. Through the power of your will, everything can change. So, if you're in a situation that you, for one reason or another, you don't feel particularly happy, and don't just complain. Just change it, and you can change it in different ways. You might be able to change it by moving, but I don't even, when I say move, just move your location for a bit, move from one group of people to another group of people. But I don't think you even have to do that. Through an act of will, you can change everything around you without having to move at all. And from a social perspective, you are right in the center of things, and you are someone who people will listen to. Capricorn. Venus is moving into Taurus, and for Capricorns, that is something to welcome. Taurus is, of course, an earth sign, and it's always good to have Venus moving into an earth sign. Recently there haven't been so many planets in earth signs. Uranus has been an earth sign, but there hasn't been much else. Okay, every now and then the moon moves into an earth sign, but the moon doesn't stay in earth signs so very long. But now Venus is going to move into Taurus, and it's going to stay in Taurus for a month. So we've got a personal planet in an earth sign. So from a Capricorn perspective, that's good news. You might have felt, even though you are a grounded Saturnine Capricorn, you might have felt recently that things haven't been as secure as they should have been. May not have been your fault, may have been someone else's fault. It just may have just been the environment in which you were functioning. And now with Venus moving into Taurus, things just feel much easier. Things feel clearer, things feel more secure, and you also feel more confident now. At least you can feel confident over the next month. Capricorn is a modest sign, and I mean that in an entirely positive way. Modesty is a virtue, and you don't tend to sing your praises for no reason. Even if you've got good reason to sing your own praises, you often hold back. But with Venus moving into Taurus, you just suddenly feel this sense of having arrived, that things are in the right place, and you can be confident now. You can actually start to be sort of enjoying yourself, and ideally being open about your opinions and your beliefs, and what makes you feel good. And that could be important, not just with your life in general. And your psychology could, for example, say something about your work. If you've got a job, or you're trying to move forward, with whatever your ambitions are. Now with Venus moving into Taurus, it's just easier. You're more open, and you are more confident. And so if you've got ideas, then now is very much a time to start to present these ideas. And if you know that you are right, you just feel that you're right with Venus and Taurus, you almost certainly are right, and your way of doing things is almost certainly the right way of doing things. So don't hold back anymore. Maybe in the past you had reason to hold back, but now that Venus is in Taurus, absolutely not. And you have an absolute right to be yourself, and to be creative, and to enjoy being creative, and also to be rewarded for your creativity. Now, Venus moving into Taurus, some would have to say that Venus in Taurus has a link with relationships. Now, that would relate to the fact that Taurus is the fifth sign from Cancer, and there is there was a school of thought that there is a school of thought in astrology that the fifth house is to do with relationships and sort of romance, not sort of one-to-one relationships and lasting relationships, but the fun, romantic side of relationships. There is a view, and it's actually has been quite a controversy in astrology. I seem to remember there have been quite sort of arguments in the 1990s about the role of the fifth house in relationships. But I have to say that there is a view, and so it is possible that Venus moving into the fifth house could improve relationships, or may bring the possibility of some new relationship, a new relationship which is fun. It could be about romance, if that's appropriate, if that's a possibility. And Venus is, of course, the planet of love, and Venus is now in Taurus, and Venus is in an earth sign, and Venus is in Taurus. That's a great place. So maybe from from a romantic perspective, Venus in Taurus could be useful, and it of course gets interesting, a bit later on when Venus starts to make a square to Pluto, but that doesn't really happen for a few days. So overall things look good. I mean, from a more practical perspective, the Moon is making a trine to Mercury. Moon is also making a sextile to Mars. So this is a time, Capricorn, when you're really able to project yourself and project your ambitions and tell everyone how you want things to be, and you can do it in a way that is powerful but actually very natural. And it may be that you have to stop. It may be that you can get people to stop and think. People are sort of maybe relaxing because it's a Friday. There's last day of the working week, but then you have an observation, you have a demand, you see something, and everyone has to pay attention to it. And that might actually be a way of seizing the via combustor. We see the via combustor, this part of a sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio, where when the Moon is in a via combustor, it's supposed to be difficult. But maybe you can become a via combustor. You can be the one that creates the problems, the one that makes people stop and think, the one who forces people to change their plans. And that might be something you could do, and something that you could benefit from. So don't be afraid of being a troublemaker. Sometimes it really is necessary, or at least is desirable. Aquarius looks to me like a reasonably good day, like yesterday. I mean, yesterday we had the Moon trine the Sun. The Moon in Libra trine the Sun in Gemini. Today we've got Moon sextile Mars and Moon trine Mercury, in air signs. So, this has a definite impact on your sign, which is Aquarius, and you are able to make things happen, and you can just be someone who is, quite positive, and of course airy, air signs, and there's no resistance there, not much resistance. And so if you've got something to say, then I think that you can definitely say it, and I think that people will listen to you. And also your sense of fun will be obvious, and so no need to be too serious. And so your sense of fun will get people's attention. They might find it a bit disturbing, but so what? The key thing is that you make an impact, and you make the world a more interesting and more fun place to be. And don't be too cynical as far as your own ideas are concerned. Deep down, Aquarius, you are actually very optimistic, and you really believe that certain things are genuinely possible, and you can indeed make them happen. And it may not be easy. So if you find yourself getting involved in speculative thinking, and you find yourself even having fantasies, don't panic, don't punish yourself, don't pour cold water on the ideas. Okay, a fantasy in its raw form may not be possible, but if you actually work on a fantasy and you really start to think about what might be possible, then it could be possible. And additionally, you may feel that you have to break free from something, that something really is holding you back. And it's not a bad thing holding you back. It's been around for some time. But it suddenly occurs to you that, hold on, you can change everything. You can turn everything upside down. People might not like it, but does that matter? And so, do not doubt yourself. And if you're positive about it and you're enthusiastic, people will just naturally understand. And you can make things more fun for everyone. And also, you're not going to lose touch of your own grounding, not least because Venus is moving into Taurus. Venus in Taurus, it does affect you, and it could make you more aware of the importance of your home and your family and security. You might not feel it today. I don't think that Venus in Taurus is something you need to worry about today, Friday, but over the weekend, as Moon moves into Scorpio, as the Moon will actually make an opposition to Venus in Taurus, and Venus will start moving to a square to Pluto. Then it might occur to you that something has changed. But I'll be talking about that when I do your horoscope for the weekend. Pisces. Venus is moving into Taurus. That's what's happening. That's one of the big events of the day. It's probably the big event of the day. And Venus in Taurus, as far as you're concerned, should probably be, something quite good. Venus is not your ruling planet, but in some respects, it is your ruling planet by exaltation, because Venus is exalted in Pisces. So Pisces and Venus, they do have a connection. And so, when trying to understand what's going on in the Pisces life, you should pay some attention to Venus. And so with Venus moving into Taurus, I think it's going to say something about the way you express yourself and the way you talk. And there's just going to be something about you that is actually quite comforting and relaxing. So, your choice of words can be very good. And it's not actually the words that matter. It's the way you package the words. And there's something reassuring about it. And people will like what you have to say. And you'll give the impression that you can be trusted, and there may actually be something quite beautiful about your words. Venus is the planet of beauty, and so your choice of words and your intonation can be powerful, perhaps even seductive as well. And Venus does move through Taurus for the next month, so do take advantage of this. Don't worry about how your words come across. I think because your words are going to come over in a way that is very effective. And aside from that, as far as the specifics of today is concerned, many Pisceans are actually going to be taking themselves quite seriously. You do understand that nothing is entirely straightforward, and at first things might seem difficult because you can't make the right connections. You're trying to make the connections, but you're not making the connections. Things don't make sense at first. But if you keep working at it, things will start making sense. The Moon is making a trine to Mercury, and the Moon trine Mercury, the Moon in Libra making a trine to Mercury in Gemini, may be about something just clicking. It suddenly comes together, and you understand it, and it wasn't obvious for a long time, and suddenly it's there. It's right in front of you, and it's not something that comes from instant sort of inspiration. It is through that work. It's actually through you going through the relevant facts, the details. You go through it all, and then it starts making sense. You don't have to announce the fact. It could actually be quite a private realization. And the Moon makes a trine to Mercury, then actually into tomorrow, or maybe even late this evening if you're in the Americas, it makes a trine to Jupiter. And so that moon trine Jupiter, yeah, that may say something about other people and your relationship with other people, remembering that Mercury is actually starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter, and over the weekend Mercury is making a conjunction to Jupiter. So, today and tomorrow, and you may find that you can get on with certain people very well, provided it's all on your terms. That's the only thing you have to bear in mind. It's not a time for you compromising or going somewhere else. I don't think you want to have a particularly active Friday in that sense. Long journeys, going places you don't want to go to. The action can happen on your territory, where you have control, and where you are in a position that you have control, you have confidence. Okay, it might not be your own home, but it could be places that you're very familiar with. Because familiarity brings power and confidence and assurance, and also other people are going to pick up on that. So if you're trying to impress people or get on with people, have relationships with people, then things can happen. Mercury is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. That should facilitate you getting closer to other people, but it does ideally have to be on your terms. You in a place where you really understand what's going on, and there's no need to go out of your way today for whatever reason. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today, Friday, from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 35, which is progress. It's certainly a day that we can make progress. We can move forward with our ambitions, and wherever we're trying to go to, we can start really seeing the first results. But we do have to be aware of some of the obstacles, and because in this hexagram, the first 3 lines move, and these first 3 lines aren't actually bad. They are actually quite encouraging, but they're asking us to take it slowly. So the bottom line moves. So the bottom line is the beginning of the matter. It's those first attempts to make something happen. And we could find, if we are trying to get going on something, that our first attempts just don't work. They don't work. It's not a catastrophe, but we don't feel that we're getting the enthusiasm we deserve. But it's just the beginning. And so if we do hit a problem, that there is an obstacle, we shouldn't get upset about it. We should just say, okay, well, not ready. Let's just see what happens. And then the second line moves. And it's the same picture. It's like we're still not ready, and we just have to wait it out until the situation changes. Then the third line moves. And with the third line moving, very often in I Ching, the third line is quite difficult, but in this case it's not. And it's saying that, okay, on our own, we may find it difficult to make progress. But if we get some help, it's a different matter. And we mustn't be too proud to get help. I don't think that we really want to get help, but if we're prepared to ask for help, then things can really start to come together and we can really start to move. And so once those 3 lines all move, we move to a different hexagram, and we move to what is arguably the best hexagram in the book, and that is hexagram 14, which is possession in great measure. So that is about things really coming together. And we do get what we want. Whatever we want, whatever we're striving for at the beginning of the day, we can get it. Now, you could see that in a very crude way. So if you are looking for money or status or some benefit, yeah, it's quite possible that you can get it. But with possession in great measure, it might be more nuanced than that. It might be just being aware that we actually have what we need. We thought we didn't have what we needed, but now we have it. And now we know we have it, we can make good progress. And because there's nothing we have to strive for, there's nothing we have to get hold of, because we've already got it. And so if we've already got it, what can stop us? So going back to that previous hexagram of progress starts off being quite slow, and we have a lack of confidence. We don't think we've got it. We may need some help from outside, but once we've done all that, and we've got the timing right, things really move, and we end Friday hopefully feeling really good about ourselves and really feeling that we do have possession in great measure. And now I want to finish off by quickly looking at Venus in Taurus. Today, Venus moves into Taurus, and this is, in theory, it's a great placement. And so in the thumbnail, that planet is Venus, by the way. It's not Jupiter, it's Venus. And yeah, Venus is in Taurus. And so Venus moves into Taurus at, I make it 5:43 a.m. London time. So yeah, if you're in California, it will move into Taurus, or if you're in Alaska or Hawaii, it will move into Taurus late on Thursday evening. So there's Venus at 0 degrees Taurus, and we should experience a real change, because Venus is now in its own sign. And traditionally in astrology, Venus in Taurus is regarded as being a good place for Venus to be. Venus is in a sign which is completely in accord with itself. It's in a feminine. Venus is a feminine planet in a feminine sign. It's in an earth sign. Venus rules the earthy triplicity by day. So there's a double dignity here by daytime when Venus moves into Taurus. So while Venus is in Taurus, it's particularly good by day, because Venus is not just ruler of Taurus, it's ruler of the triplicity by day. Of course, by night, the moon rules the earthy triplicity. And Venus in Taurus is supposed to be a placement which is generally lucky, because Venus is well placed. But we also associate Taurus with beauty and the good things in life, and it can be very material. So people with Venus in Taurus can regard money as being important, but not necessarily. You could say that if you've got Venus in Taurus, you're naturally grounded. You don't have to worry about money, because it's there. You feel comfortable with the material world, so you don't necessarily have to strive for it. And so that might be an advantage of having Venus in Taurus. And there can very often be a spirituality with Venus in Taurus. I mean, there can be a lack of spirituality if you regard Venus in Taurus as being overly material, but Taurus, in terms of feeling this natural living world on which we live, if you're into Gaia, for example, that's the earth goddess. That might be how Venus in Taurus manifests. But yeah, Venus in Taurus can be stubborn. I mean, we should not forget that Taurus is a fixed sign. And, Venus in Taurus, you could say, well, particularly in a female chart, in a female chart, Venus is not going to be projected. It's who the woman is, because because it's a female planet in a female, so it's not going to be projected. Venus in Taurus may just say who they are, what kind of person a woman is. Venus in Taurus, a woman who is stubborn, who sticks to her point of view, is not prepared to compromise. Now, a man with Venus in Taurus, he could own it, he might project it. A man with Venus in Taurus might say something about the kind of woman he's attracted to, or that might relate to his mother and be projected onto someone else. And so Venus in Taurus might be about expectations, the kind of expectations he has of the women in his life. And so those are a few thoughts about Venus in Taurus. I mean, there are other obscure things about Venus in Taurus that you might want to consider. I mean, Taurus is the neck, and there may be a connection between Taurus and the neck. And one shouldn't forget that Venus in Taurus, well, we have to think about whereabouts in the sign it is. If Venus is late in Taurus, it actually starts to get quite close to Caput Algol. Sorry, Caput Algol. I was corrected for saying I shouldn't call it Caput Algol. I was corrected for using the word Caput Algol because Caput is Latin and Algol is Arabic, and I shouldn't be mixing the Latin and the Arabic. So let me rephrase that. Let me call it the head of a demon, Algol, Ras Al Ghul, I think, as it's called in Arabic, and so Venus in late Taurus, well, you could see that as being quite negative. Yeah, it's still in its own sign, but that Algol influence may make itself felt. And in fact, if we look at, I'm about to look at some charts of people with Venus and Taurus. We will soon see that some of them, there is a connection with in places with strangulation and hanging. But I'll be coming on to that in a moment. So I want to finish off, just by looking at a few people who have Venus in Taurus, or had Venus in Taurus. And one of them, talking about the subject of hanging, is Albert Pierpoint. So Albert Pierpoint, born an Aries, born March the 30th, 1905, was, or if you like, almost a celebrity hangman in Britain before the death penalty was abolished. And he hanged a lot of the war criminals. He hanged the last woman to be hanged, Ruth Ellis, and he was known for his speed and his kind of humanitarian approach. He wanted his executions to be quick and as painless as possible, and he did have Venus in Taurus. Now, his Venus was not in late Taurus, was not conjunct Algol. I was a bit disappointed to see that his Venus wasn't conjunct Algol. But he does have Mars at 25 Scorpio. And I often wonder with fixed stars, should one use conjunctions to fixed stars, or only conjunction, or should one actually consider oppositions as well? And so it may be with his Mars opposition Algol that in some way he was picking up on that. And Mars in Scorpio, what he's putting his energy into, well, he's certainly putting his energy into death. I mean, I don't have a time of birth, but he was a hangman, and people say he was a very good hangman, if you can be a good hangman. And so, he has Mars in Scorpio, opposition Algol, and that might say something about him. But that Venus in Taurus just adds the emphasis, Venus in Taurus, because Taurus is the neck. That's a part of the body. We shouldn't forget that. The Aries is the head, Taurus is the neck. So somehow he has a relationship to necks in his case. And talking about hanging, there is Judge Jeffreys. Now, Judge Jeffreys, born 1645, he was known as a hanging judge. So you get this idea of a hanging judge. There are hanging judges who, in the United States as well, judges who, they like to give the death penalty. They like to hand the death penalty down. And he was infamous for the bloody assizes. And the bloody assizes took place in the 17th century, end of the 17th century. There was a rebellion by the Duke of Monmouth against James II, who was the Catholic king, and there was a rebellion, and the rebellion was put down, and there was a series of trials for the rebels, and a huge amount of them were hanged, and he was infamous for this. And so he, again, this hanging judge and the bloody assizes, and he has Venus at 22 Taurus. Now, you might say, hold on, that's not Algol. Well, it is Algol, because remember, he was born in 1645. So because of precession, Venus was actually within 1 degree of Algol. And notice that he had Venus opposition Uranus. So in his case, that Venus in Taurus opposition Uranus could have said something about his behavior, and that may say something also, about Venus. I think he had bad gout as well. He was I think at the end of his career he was arrested, and because when James II got deposed or left the country, his political fortunes collapsed. So in the end, it didn't really work well for him. But I think that he is, he may give us an example of how Venus in Taurus is working, and that Venus is square his nodal axis as well. Venus Uranus hitting his nodes, and so was he doing the right thing? Possibly not. And then there is Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler had Venus in Taurus. So what do we make of this? Well, you could say, okay, he's got Venus in Taurus, he's got a load of other stuff in Taurus. Hitler had Sun, Mars, Venus in Taurus. So you could say that a person who has 3 personal planets in Taurus is just in general going to be very stubborn, very focused on what he wants. You could say, well, it is the triumph of the will, all those planets in Taurus. But, what about Venus in particular? Well, Venus is the female principle, and some of the women who got involved with him, it didn't work well. There was his niece, what was her name, Gelly, who he got obsessed about, and he sort of ended up sort of controlling her life. Of course, he was much older than her, and in the end, she committed suicide. And then Eva Braun, likewise, she committed suicide, or was it murder-suicide, in the bunker right at the end of the Second World War. So that might be how that Venus-Mars conjunction is working. Mars represents what happens to women who get too close to him, thinking particularly of his niece and Eva Braun. But Venus in Taurus could be about his charisma. Venus-Mars conjunction, like it or not, Venus and Mars conjunction can be extremely charismatic and can appear attractive to some people. Venus-Mars is about attraction and repulsion. Maybe sort of outsiders visiting Germany couldn't understand what the big thing about Hitler was, but if one was German at a particular time in history, yeah, he did seem attractive. And so that could be how Venus-Mars was working. And additionally, as I said earlier, Venus in Taurus has a reputation for being indulgent. Yet Hitler didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he was, I think, a vegetarian. And so he had no indulgences. And so you could say that someone with Venus in Taurus, or indeed maybe Taurians in general, who don't have indulgences, who are very austere, can actually be quite scary. And on a different note, Melania Trump, she has Venus in Taurus, and she's got a load of planets in Taurus. She's got Sun, Saturn, Mercury, Venus in Taurus, and she's got Moon in Capricorn. And what about her Venus in Taurus? Well, her Venus in Taurus, she certainly likes the good things in life. Money is important to her. The accoutrements of wealth matter to her. And, of course, she came to America sort of as a model, and it was her beauty was a very important part of her self-expression, and that said something about her relationship with her husband. And remembering, here is a woman that's got loads of planets in Earth signs, five traditional planets in Earth signs plus Pluto, and of course her husband Donald, he doesn't have any planets in Earth signs. So you can see with Donald Trump having that lack of Earth, how he could be attracted to someone like Melania. And Nancy Pelosi, she's got Venus in Taurus. She's got Venus in Taurus conjunct the midheaven. Now you might just say Venus in Taurus. Venus is her. It's who she is. She's not projecting it. She's a successful politician. Whatever you think of her, she is a successful politician. Okay, she may have contributed to the messing up of the 2024 election. But she's got Venus on. Yeah, she's got Venus on the midheaven. She's got Venus conjunct Mars on the midheaven. So she seems to personify that quite well. I think she's quite into money, isn't she? People talk a lot about her stock portfolio and how good she is at managing it, and she knows what to buy and she knows when to sell it, and so money does matter to her, and she is a rich and successful woman enjoying the good things in life. And so that's Venus in Taurus for you. And on the theme of American politics, Marco Rubio has Venus in Taurus. Difficult to know what to make of it, Venus in Taurus. He's a Gemini with Venus in Taurus. Venus conjunct Mercury in Taurus. He's a politician. He's an effective politician up to a point. Maybe we haven't seen how this Venus in Taurus is working yet. Now he's Secretary of State. He has to actually get on with foreign leaders. I think he's doing a better job than his predecessor. Antony Blinken, who was his predecessor as Secretary of State, also had Venus in Taurus. And I think Antony Blinken was probably one of the worst Secretaries of State that America has ever had. He sort of fell out with a lot of people. Whether it's just, he just didn't get on with the world leaders that mattered. He got on with people on his wavelength, perhaps in Western Europe, but he didn't get on with. Obviously, didn't get on with the Russians, the Chinese, the Saudis. He wasn't just very bad for America's foreign policy. So he had Venus in Taurus. Venus quite right in the middle of a sign, 145 degrees from the Aries point. So in his case, Venus opposition Neptune, just confused about how he relates to these foreign leaders, but also being very stubborn with Venus, Venus square Saturn, and just he has his view of the world, and he's not prepared to compromise it, and ended up actually being just quite petulant. It didn't really help, but he had a combust Mercury. With Marco Rubio, he might have some of the same issues, but he is a Gemini, and perhaps he has more flexibility than Antony Blinken. I'm just pointing out that Marco Rubio has Venus in Taurus, it's very difficult to work out, how he's going to work out. I mean, certainly I think he's a better Secretary of State from his predecessor, for sure. At least he's talking to the Russians. I mean, that is something. He actually, when talking to the Russians after the terrorist attack in Kursk, he sent his condolences, which I don't think that's something that Antony Blinken would have done. And so then, in terms of British politics, there is Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage has Venus in Taurus. More difficult to make sense of this. It is a female planet, but it's quite close to his midheaven. I mean, it's not exactly on his midheaven. We do have a time of birth for him. His Venus is in a fixed sign, so that is quite stubborn. That is true. I mean, he really sort of holds on to something. Now, Hitler had Venus in Taurus, but Hitler had no indulgences. Nigel Farage definitely enjoys the good things in life. He is very sort of human. He's often seen with a pint of beer in his hand, and he's got Venus square Saturn. So I find it difficult to know to actually isolate that Venus in Taurus. But just Venus in Taurus, he has just been on the political circuit, for a long time. Since the 90s, and he's been pushing the same agenda, and he's actually been quite successful, and that might be reflected by the fact that Venus is in its own sign, and that Venus square Saturn just could give him real resilience. And finally, we shouldn't forget that Venus in Taurus can be about the voice, and it can be about singing. And Paul McCartney, former Beatle, has Venus in Taurus. There is his Venus at 19 Taurus, and so his moon is square Venus. So you could say in his case, Venus in Taurus, as a singer, that I don't have a great deal of interest in Paul McCartney, but just end on a note of someone who is successful, and everyone seems to like Paul McCartney, and he has he was able to utilize that Venus in Taurus in terms of his musical career. So that's it. Those are some thoughts on Venus in Taurus. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.